Brief content warning. This vlog contains discussions about discrimination, which some people may find upsetting, but I feel that it is something important to be shared. Now, this is a follow-on from my previous vlog concerning the passing of Queen Elizabeth II on the 8th of September 2022, and I accidentally said August in the last one, but don't worry, I'm going to correct that mistake this time. This vlog is fully scripted, albeit with notes that I wrote during one sitting with a few adjustments. It is more of a structured essay, if I'm so bold to name it as so, albeit not specifically academic. I use no sources. It remains fundamentally a stream of consciousness, but with structure. It is not because I can't be bothered to do any research. I'm just getting this out of my system before I forget it or it becomes irrelevant and it still remains in the public conscience, or consciousness, should I say, sorry. You see, I believe that the most inspiring thoughts are spontaneous. This is the Aspie Hyena vlog. I think I understand why people in the former colonies of the British Empire feel no remorse or pity for the passing of an old woman. To them, the Queen represents everything they despise of wrongs done to their ancestors. She is their figurehead of hatred or resentment. They need something upon which to vent their frustrations after so many generations lying dormant. But why have they been dormant? Or maybe they are not dormant, but now's the best time to shout about it. But why now? Why when she's passed? I've just answered that question. It's because they will be heard. For example, there's an old stock film revolving around Twitter of a rich white woman feeding scraps to starving black children on a plantation, or what appears to be a plantation. Above the film clip, you will find the caption, "The late Queen of England." Only this isn't the Queen. It was filmed a couple of decades before she was born. And I'm not sure if the woman herself is British. Some sources claim she is French, though I don't think slavery was a thing in France at the time. I mean, the British Empire had abolished slavery in her colonies decades before the invention of moving picture. Either way, the film is inaccurate. It is not the Queen. I'm not entirely sure who it is, but that's not the main point. Okay, what's the main point? This got me thinking about two particular individuals. I'm speaking theoretically, or hypothetically, should I say. So I'm speaking hypothetically for the most part, though there's some amount of truth in what I'm saying. These two people are real, but I shan't name names. But I will say that these two are in a situation where they are stuck with each other. But one of them finds the company of the other as a nuisance. There's a degree of resentment with this individual, bordering on hatred. The resentful one dismisses the other as a bigot without a sense of modern ethic. Or modern ethics, rather. He would gladly denounce him publicly, albeit from behind a keyboard while the other one's back is turned, and anonymously online, seeing as the other shares the exact opposite principles of the younger man's beliefs. The youth is more liberal, while the old man is conservative. According to the youth's perspective, the old man cares nothing for others and is but a selfish oaf. Then, one day, he hears the old man weeping over the crushed egg of a bird, lamenting the life lost and denied before it had hatched. This should change the resentful youth's perspective. But come the next morning, after another disagreement, he shall maintain his resentful nature towards the old man. After such a repetitive, never-ending pattern, the old man becomes his figurehead of hate and resentment. The Queen only had so much power. Though rich beyond measure of the average subject, she would not, or maybe could not, interfere in the affairs of the duly elected Parliament, which at time and again voted legislation that is against the best interests of the public at home and abroad. Her non-interference makes her a bystander, thus deserving of resentment. This is the mindset of the former colonies, long since liberated at the start of her 70-year reign. Now that they have independence, is of little consequence. They need a figurehead or a other upon whom to blame their current misfortunes. The crimes of the past still linger in the public consciousness. Despite the passage of time, these wounds fester without healing. Though their problems have little to do with Britain after half a century, they need something upon which to vent their frustrations. So my main inquiry is as follows. Does resentment change one's reality? This can be both private resentment or public. It would explain for why people so often fall for propaganda. Even in this age of unlimited information, a few lies are bound to be unearthed and taken for granted. Uncertainty remains uniform, for we do not experience the suffering across the globe directly or as a first-person observer. We use the news or social media as an indirect access to information. But facts can be distorted, especially for political means. As news is presented to evoke or provoke outrage, we find ourselves emotionally manipulated by what we are told. We therefore need a figurehead of hate. Why are certain groups taken in by the likes of Donald Trump, or displaying resentment upon Barack Obama with false claims that he's a foreigner and he was never fit to hold office? Because they need a figurehead to follow and another to hate. They are taken in and believe in the words of their speaker because their shared sense of resentment shapes their perception, thus distorting the focal point of the reality that surrounds them. Any oppressed group can form a shared sense of resentment towards any specific figure or flag or symbol, insofar as that the symbol is collectively interpreted by a community with a shared sense of values. The symbol might have been designed for something completely different, thus making the resentment unintentional. This is especially troubling when it involves two diametrically opposed communities. No matter what counter-argument one may present to the other, there will be among the Unionists and Catholics in Ireland, who always resent the Loyalists or the Protestants and rebuke the Union flag as Western democracies appall the swastika. There may exist some Irish Catholics or Unionists who are incapable of distinguishing between the two, as both represent everything they despise, even though not every Unionist is a Catholic and not every Catholic is a Unionist. Vice versa. Protestants may look down upon Catholics as murderers, child abusers, or IRA sympathisers, even if the Catholic sat opposite them holds none of these attributes. Maybe it doesn't matter to the Protestant, especially if they've suffered at the hands of child abuse or terrorism, which they attribute to Catholics and Unionists through a combination of shared past experiences and traumas, which gather to shape their perspective of reality. No matter how hard this specific Catholic tries to prove his case, his opponent will not accept him. And that is the tragic truth in a lot of communities in Ireland. Mindsets are almost impossible to change. You can't stop someone from thinking. You can't stop them from feeling. Maybe it's not just experience, but the way that they feel that shapes one's perception. Though in theory we're meant to be rational animals, hence what separates us from the wild pack animal, fear and discrimination runs deep in our collective psyche. That when faced with someone who looks like a threat, but in reality isn't, one can so easily fall into the trap that is the cycle of hate. We fear that which we do not know. Fear has kept us alive for thousands of years. Anything or anyone unfortunate enough or different to be deemed as other is therefore a threat. Or what about resentment? That's not as violent or belligerent as hate, but it can just as easily accelerate the process. Suppose one is envious of a person who is of colour or of the opposite sex because they've succeeded where one has failed time and again, despite doing everything as instructed. Prejudice, I can't pronounce the word. Prejudice is prejudging. The other is judged as a threat to one's status and security. It is not driven by fear of physical harm, but of pride. The results here can be just as insidious. Discrimination is a human attribute shared with our carnal instincts. For those who have suffered traumatic experiences at the hands of the other, no matter the reality of the circumstances, whether the result of a misunderstanding or a common disagreement, or an inability from the one who perceives oneself as having been wronged, they thus justify their fear and bigotry upon the other. It is a human, albeit discriminatory response. It is natural to fear and hate that which one cannot comprehend. But in a civilized world, it isn't necessarily the right thing. Thus, we should try to understand. In a civilized and developed society, this is possible, but for communities that have suffered at the hands of other communities, I'm just going to leave that hanging. Well, okay, I'll answer, but bear with me. What if discrimination and racism are so ingrained upon the social DNA of certain societies and perhaps even nations that there may be no escape from it without evoking an existential crisis. It's a pessimistic outlook, but until we find a way to resolve our differences, I fear the cycle of loathing, resentment and fear shall continue for many generations to come, leaving nations of the world divided and afraid. I do not speak of every nation or culture, but there are some that have been let down time and again and feel the need to take out their frustrations upon the other. They feel justified in their resentment because of their prior experiences. Occasionally, and very unfortunately for some families or communities, this might be the sum of their experiences. How can the other, no matter how benign their intentions, seek common ground with a community that has suffered to such an extent that their resentment runs deep in their veins? How do we find that common ground? It is important that we acknowledge our mistakes and that we admit that at times resentment has run so deep for so long that to break through the cycle of hatred and heal the wounds of decades will take another generation. Worse, should resentment reside within the other, as well as the one who's expressing that resentment, then I feel there's no hope of gaining common ground. You can't change human nature. Sometimes you can't change people's minds. And sometimes people just don't want to be helped. So should we give up? Of course not. If their resentment threatens their neighbour or threatens us or our way of life, we have to try. It is our duty as neighbours to break through the cycle of resentment, or at least try. Maybe we could compromise, make amends for the mistakes of the past. Desmond Tutu, at the end of apartheid in South Africa, he declared a period of reconciliation. This was not easy for either side, but in the long term, it helped to prevent further bloodshed. Neighbour could finally cease fighting neighbour. No one group or race need be dominant or racially superior. If we live by that example, maybe there remains the chance for us to coexist. But only if we try.